Well, I'm delighted to have Ronald Calafunga with us, and as you know from our services this last week here at Berean, we've just been greatly blessed by his ministry. And I wanted to have a few moments here in my study, Ronald, with you just to ask a few questions on a few subjects that I could put on my blog for our church family. And there'll be other people around the country that will hear this, and if I tag you and Conrad and others, it'll go back to Africa as well. But a couple of thoughts came to my mind. We've had some wonderful fellowship this week, and I've been greatly blessed by your ministry, and you've shared with me some thoughts about worship here and in Africa. And I was just going to ask you if you could just tell our church family at Berean just a few thoughts about worship in your church and what's it like and worship in the African church.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure for me to be here. I have enjoyed every moment of it. Worship in Africa, I presume your interest is more on worship in regard to our church,
right?
Our church experience. We are committed to what is referred to as the regulative principle of worship, which was promulgated by the Reformers and popularized by the Puritans. And that, of course, means we try to do in worship only what is expressly or implicitly taught in the scriptures. We would emphasize the place of singing, Bible reading, preaching, of course. From time to time we have baptism, we have the Lord's Supper, and any elements that biblically allowed, we would give ourselves to. In terms of the essence of our worship, I don't see that it's very different from what yours looks like. Mm-hmm. But there would be matters of form that are more expressive of our cultural context. Sure. Right. But in general, I haven't really seen much of a difference in terms of how we do it.
How did you come to appreciate some of the old hymns? You mentioned that some of the hymns we sing that you sing in Africa. What brought you into the familiarity with these old hymns?
Well, I was converted out of a Roman Catholic setting, and my first evangelical church was, in fact, Lusaka Baptist Church, where I'm now privileged to be a pastor. And right from the word go, I was inducted into their hymnody, and it's been the same ever since. So it's the only thing I know, basically. That's been my worship experience, and that of many others in our circles. Our spiritual fathers introduced us to these hymns, and we've carried on with the tradition.
Amen. I know you told me that you've been singing some of the hymns of Vernon High.
Yeah.
How did you get familiar with Vernon's hymns?
Well, the hymn book that most of our Reformed Baptist churches use in Zambia is the Grace Hymns.
Grace Hymns.
Yeah. That was once upon a time the hymn book that most Reformed Baptist churches in England used. Mm-hmm. And that's what we use to this day. And in the Grace Hymns are to be found some of the hymns written by Vernon High.
Great hymn writer, isn't it?
That's right.
Do you like the hymn, Great is the Gospel?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we sing that quite often in our church.
That's a great hymn.
Yes.
What are some of the concerns that you have about worship in the African culture? Are there tendencies coming in from the West or America that might corrupt the worship in your country? What are some of those concerns you may have?
Yeah. Well, some of the concerns have little to do with America. They have everything to do with what as Africans we are prone to doing. There is an extent to which the African outlook is driven by an animistic worldview.
Animistic worldview?
Animistic,
Yeah, okay.
that's right. And animism therefore does show up from time to time in the African worship experience. Now, in the Christian context, sometimes what is animism is called charismatic worship, when in fact it is just an expression of African spiritism. So I think one concern, therefore, is that African spiritism is showing up in a Christian garb, and in various ways it's being accommodated, even in the worship. That's one concern. The other, of course, would be the negative influence of the faith charismatic movement. And
The Word of Faith movement?
The modern, yes, that's right. Yeah, sometimes we have to make a distinction between the charismatic movement and the faith charismatic movement. There is a growing influence of the ideas and practices of the faith charismatic movement. Some of those ideas go contrary to the essence of the gospel. In fact, my chief concern is that increasingly in those circles, at least in the way they express themselves in Zambia, there is very little gospel preaching. There is a lot of emphasis on miracles, miracle performance, and very little on actual gospel preaching. So although they are certainly growing in number, I have my doubts that it's a growth reflective of gospel influence. It's not a growth in the knowledge of Christ and in the experience of the power of the gospel, but a growth resulting from the attraction of the so-called miraculous, which even people who have no real interest in the gospel will obviously be drawn to. The other is the danger of showmanship. The celebrity cult has come into the church and into the worship. The emphasis on entertainment and almost a denigration of reverence in worship, the casualization of worship is a very growing phenomena, and I'm not so sure whether the source is America, but certainly it has some resemblance to what I see in the West as well.
I appreciate your comments this week as we've talked personally, and then sometimes in the pulpit you've made some comments, references, and that's a concern I've had about worship, that it becomes too casual, too centered on man, too personality-centered, entertainment-oriented, getting away from gospel preaching and like you say, true reverence and true worship before God. Well, again, these have been wonderful times in our midst. The Lord's hand has been on your ministry here, and we at Berean have been greatly blessed. And I want the people back in Africa, in your church in Zambia, to know that your pastor has been a great blessing to us, and we have been richly blessed by his preaching, by his presence here. We thank you from the depths of our heart that you allowed him to come and minister to us in these days, and we are very, very pleased. So anyway, Ronald, God bless you.
Thank you so much. It's
Amen.
been my pleasure.
God bless you. Amen.